Well, Barrister Daw KC joins me now to discuss this. Chris, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. Now, of course, Russell Brand denies the criminal allegations against him. I want to know, what do you think? Do media investigations like this, is there a risk that they undermine the legal process, the presumption of innocent until proven guilty? We do seem to have what appears to be trial by media, trial by social media.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an enormous risk that wherever there's a sort of firestorm of publicity around a high-profile figure and a lot of allegations made in an anonymised way, as most of these allegations have been made, and there's just an enormous body of publicity around those allegations. If the police ever become involved in an investigation into the allegations of misconduct in the United Kingdom, the problem is that there is so much adverse publicity that it would often be very, very difficult for the person who's accused to be tried at all. And there is a legal process called abuse of process, or a legal application that the defence can make to say that even if there's a wealth of evidence against somebody, if that person can't receive a fair trial because of all of the publicity that's taken place, the case will actually be stopped and the person won't go to trial at all. So that's the risk with some of these very high-profile media campaigns, is that they actually make it more difficult rather than less for the person to be prosecuted and to taken through the courts.
So what the Sunday Times, Channel 4, The Times have done with this investigation by publishing it in this way could actually put justice at risk, could actually make it less likely that Russell Brand, if these allegations are in fact true, less chance that he could be punished as a result.
In Britain, obviously the law in the United States, where some of this conduct is alleged to have taken place, is completely different, and they don't have a restriction on pre-trial publicity. And you often see American prosecutors and American lawyers going on television and talking openly about the case and discussing it in great detail. So it wouldn't make any difference in the US, where, as I say, that kind of publicity is very much the norm, as your viewers will have seen many times. But in Britain, in England at least, where I practice, we have very strong contempt of court laws. And if there was already a criminal investigation open in this country, none of this publicity would be allowed. There would be automatic reporting restrictions which would prevent prejudicial publicity from taking place. So if you take the example of Lucy Letby, who was recently, as everyone will remember, convicted of the most appalling series of murders and attempted murders of babies. As soon as that criminal investigation began, however many years ago, there was almost a kind of complete blanket ban on publicity other than the very bare facts of what was going on and what the allegations were. And then the case goes to trial, and all that the media can report are what's happening in court and the very kind of strict restrictions that judges put in place. And she was convicted. It was only after those guilty verdicts that all of the publicity could take place. Whereas here, we're seeing it almost exactly the opposite way around. And that's the danger, is that at some point, if there is an investigation and if there is a prosecution, it will actually play into the defence's hands, who will be able to say, how can this person have a fair trial because of all this publicity?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very strong point to make. It sometimes doesn't seem to make sense as an outsider looking at how we deal with criminal allegations. And of course, the alleged victims in this case, who have spoken to Channel 4, spoken to the Sunday Times, will remain anonymous, at least for now. So, you know, they're able to make these allegations. Russell Brand was given the right to reply. He did post this video on his YouTube and on his X Twitter account, and it's now had upwards of 50 million views, I think. So it really has been seen by many, many people. He denies them very strongly. Where, in your view, should the line be drawn between freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and due process here and the rights of the individual? Because I think a lot of people, it's hard to get your head around where that should lie.
Well, English law is fairly straightforward, and I think probably a matter of common sense, which is essentially the publicity that's allowed if there is no criminal investigation and nothing is happening is unrestricted. But as soon as the police become involved and there is a formal criminal investigation and someone's arrested, for example, then those reporting restrictions kick in, and you have to only report sort of factual information. You can't have, lots of allegations being made and wild comments and extreme views being expressed about a case as soon as the police and the criminal process are involved. And I think that must be right. I think media
But it's not
organisations...
realistic. Sorry to interrupt, Chris, but the problem is it's not very realistic in this world that we're living in now because of social media. People can say absolutely anything they like with practically no chance that they'll even be forced to take it down.
Well, that's not true in England. I mean, it's certainly, as you're right to point that out, that's certainly the case in the US and much of the world. But in England, we have reporting restrictions that are enforced by law. So if someone breaks those reported, a journalist or anyone else on social media, it makes no difference whether it's a member of the public or a journalist. And many of the cases I've been involved in, very, very high profile cases, judges have had to warn the public. If you make this sort of comment, and it happened in, as I say, a very high-profile case I did last year, and if you make these sorts of comments, you're at risk of being arrested and even sent to prison for contempt of court. That's England. So we have quite strict rules in this country. In other places, well, frankly, I don't know how any jury could come to a trial in the United States and take Donald Trump, for example, who's facing 3 or 4 criminal indictments, and the amount of publicity and all of the comment that's been made online and in the media, how there could ever be realistically an objective, fair jury to look at that case. I think that's very, very difficult to imagine. And I think likewise, I have to say, if Russell Brown were ever charged with the offences he's been accused of in England, I think it would be a very, very difficult job to find a jury who could try that case without some form of prejudice. But I suspect, frankly, in the end, that's what would happen if there were charges and it went through the process. I think it probably would be allowed to go to trial because very few cases are actually stopped on publicity grounds. But that doesn't mean that journalists and members of the public who are commenting on these cases shouldn't just be careful that you end up making comment which achieves the opposite of what you want. Because if you want someone who's committed these sorts of crimes, and I'm not suggesting for a moment Robert Russell Brand has, I have no idea, but whoever it is, if you want someone to face justice, generally speaking, big waves of publicity with lots of wild allegations is not the way to achieve that justice in the criminal justice system.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time and your comments. Chris Daw KC, the barrister. Thank you very much indeed.